I've been talking about communications for quite a long time, and I think authentic conversations can really change your life because you're no longer acting. And one of the most common topics that people ask me about is authentic flirtation, because flirtation feels like the environment where people need to perform the most. I need to present this image, I need to look a certain way. These are the people who are successful and they have all these great lines. And I'm here today because I want to tell you how to authentically flirt. First of all, how to find your voice, even so that you can authentically flirt. And then when you're no longer performing, when you could just be yourself and also flirtatious, you are able to make that much more of an impact because you no longer need to remember anything. You don't need to come up with anything. You don't need to change anything. You don't need to even keep a script going because you just know who you are and then you come in with that energy. Now I know what you might be thinking. If I came in with my real energy, I don't know about that. And I hear the concern, uh, and yet I think when we enter spaces, there are two conversations we're having often. One conversation is the conversation we're having out loud, and the other is what I call the silent conversation. All of flirtation is about the silent conversation. Now, what is the silent conversation? Well, it is everything that you are communicating outside of the words you are explicitly saying. Everything with your body language, everything with what you're not saying potentially. All these elements contribute to a conversation, to a communication that you give off to the other person. We notice these in our heartbeats. We notice them in this gut feeling when someone approaches us potentially. So, what is the silent conversation? Well, I'm going to start off with a story. The year is 2011, and a 911 dispatcher receives a call. He picks up. Hi, I'd like to order a pizza. Ma'am, I think you have the wrong number. No. Medium, please. Is everything okay? No, I don't want fries with that. As you can see, this conversation continues for a little bit, and he asks, is there someone there with you? And he understands, based on how she's speaking, she's talking about pizzas. How did he understand that there was someone there with her, that it wasn't safe for her to talk? Well, he was aware. Okay, she's calling 911. He had two sort of thoughts in his mind. Either she's calling because it's a prank call or potentially a mistake, or she really needs 911. Now, when he picked up the call, the first thought is probably, based on what I'm hearing out loud in the out loud conversation, I'm probably going to guess that it belongs to a prank or maybe just a misnumber, a mistake. This person doesn't mean to be calling here. And when she responds again, and yet they're having the same conversation, and she's just using pizza because she needs to create a sense of safety for herself. She needs to pretend she's talking about pizza, but it has nothing to do with pizza. The silent conversation that was going on between them, that she was having, was, this is what is going on for me. I am in a situation where I'm conveying to you with my stress and concern, and my responses to you, no and yes, and then I'm just throwing in some aspect of pizza or something related, but that's for my own safety. The silent conversation exists in every single aspect of our lives. If you show up to work and your manager asks you how you did on the project or what you've been up to, there are two ways for a person to say they haven't completed the work that they were supposed to do. One way might convey, hey, I don't have that project done just yet. It's on its way. The energy there doesn't convey it's going to be done on time and we're going to be fine. It conveys a sense of lack of certainty, and not just lack of certainty on the project. The project could be in the same place. It could be at 70% for two different sorts of people, and you just need that last 30%. But if you show up in a way that your silent conversation, and your silent conversation is where you authentically are. Often our bodies and our minds and our breathing gives off a lot more than what we say out loud. So if you show up and you have 70% done, but you know, you've taken the time that you know this last 30% you can get done, then the story you're telling is a different story. The story you're telling in your silent conversation can even impact the story you tell in your out loud conversation. So listen to the silent conversation that is going on externally, because when the manager is asking, how is the progress? They're not asking, or if it's done, or where you're at with whatever it is. They might not even be asking, is it done? And if it's not done, I'm upset. And if that's the message you think you're hearing, but instead your response has the potential to say, I understand what I'm supposed to do, I have clear direction, and I have a clear path forward. That is much more reassuring. Now, let's bring this back to the case of flirtation. What is the silent conversation? Well, flirtation is an expression. It just means that you are expressing interest. When you flirt, you are expressing interest. Well, okay, fine. Many people have expressed interest and it doesn't often go well, because sometimes we show up to a conversation and the difference between two people saying the exact same flirtatious line, the exact same corny or cheesy pickup line, is one person approaches, and even before this person approaches, they are already conveying with everything. Every part of them says, you are awesome. I'm expressing interest in you, but I'm not. But I have nothing to offer. But I'm wasting your time. But I'm expecting you to let you down. Well, if anyone approaches you and they're trying to, let's say, just sell you something, and they're approaching you and they're acting a little shady and, you want to buy this? Not now. Not the way you're expressing it. This is the same thing in sales as well. The silent conversation matters so much, because when you approach an individual that you're interested in, why are you interested in them? Are you interested in them because I see you as an opportunity for my status? Because then the way you're going to approach that conversation will be very different. And even the kinds of people that you will attract will be very different than if the following silent conversation goes on. The silent conversation is, I know who I am. I know what I'm worth. I know that I bring good, enjoyable, interesting, whatever it is, valuable energy to a space. And then you approach someone and you say, I want you to be a part of this. I have something to offer. I have a wonderful time to offer. I have great conversation, great thoughts, interesting perspective. And I'm not saying those explicitly, because sometimes you could say these exact things explicitly And it's like, who does this person think they are? I'm talking about a real confidence. When you have a real confidence, then fine, you have a silly joke. The silly joke is just what's on the surface, but what's really going on behind the scenes is, I think you're interesting. I am trying to gain your attention, but I also already feel a sense of worthiness. And it's not defined by you. If you were to reject me, and how you deal with rejection is often a reflection of that. If a person rejects you and they're a monster and they're not interesting and why would you have to say that? Because if you are really such a blessing to be around and you think for whatever reason this person has something to offer as well, then whatever, it wasn't meant to be. I am confident in myself. I can approach you and I know what I have to offer. So if you're not interested, it's your loss. And I don't need to say that to you, because the way I walk away and the way I accept tells you I think it's your loss. You're still welcome and entitled to your own opinion. The silent conversation is just one aspect that we need to pay attention to. Flirtation is a lot more than that, because fine, you might have all the confidence in the world, but how do you actually get past the silent conversation? Is very important, at least for that first step. And it's important throughout, but there's more than just the silent conversation. You're not just gonna use pickup lines the entire time, although some people might. The expression of interest, and when you want to authentically flirt, you want to both share of yourself and learn about the other person. And it's important about striking a balance there. Just talking about yourself, just making it about you, of course, is a problem. Because are you interested in the other person? Or are you interested in an audience? Because that makes the other person replaceable. And flirtation often recognizes and suggests to someone their irreplaceability. And by recognizing another person's uniqueness, not just you are attractive, you're in the category of attractive people, but rather you are unique. When that is recognized, that you have to both share information of yourself that is relevant, that is interesting, that sometimes is even, I know what I'm worth, but I want to impress you. I care about impressing you. That is a more masculine flirtatious energy, an energy that is sort of seeking and showing off and flaunting, like when the birds dance in these David Attenborough documentaries. Look at my feathers and how I can dance. And the lady's like, oh, I don't care, but looking still, is still interested. Well, that's the masculine, and there's also the feminine, of course, the flirtatious aspect. But how can you share of yourself and also learn about the other person? The key is good questions. I've made other videos about how to ask questions more generally, but when you're asking questions in dating, in flirtation, be it with someone you've just met, to someone you're dating, to someone you've been married to for the last 60 years. Your questions are able to convey a lot about you. In a question, you are able to share information. Now, what I don't mean is prefacing your question with, I do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. What are your thoughts on how awesome I am? Or what are your thoughts on this particular very small thing? A question, a good question, hints to the other person, gives a person a little bit of insight on the things that matter to you. If you ask all the classic questions, you're not sharing of yourself. Oh, I read these 24 questions on wherever it is, or I read this list of questions, these list of interesting things that could open up conversation. Don't get me wrong, they can be valuable, but how much more powerful is asking a question that guides you? Who you are right now is your answers. Who you are as a person and the directions you take are your questions. Your questions guide every single thing that you do. If your questions are, how do I gain the most influence, then that is what's going to drive you. How do I make the most money? How do I flirt the best? How do I? Each of these questions drive your actions. Now, when you ask a person a question that is true to you and true to your experience and true to the way that you think, you are sharing of yourself, and you're basically saying to them, these are the paint colors with which I paint my life. These are some of the paint colors. What kind of art do you make with that? You are both sharing with them your colors, your true colors, and simultaneously giving them a space to use this language, to use your concepts, your terms, whatever it is, to create something for themselves. Now, we're quite abstract here, of course. But let's say, in the case of people who belong to the same religion or to the same background, and let's say, or even someone who is entirely secular, a person who's entirely secular and says, what does the ideal family time look like to you? Or what do you hope to be as a parent? Each of these questions, even what do you think, what are your hot takes on fashion? Any of these things all say something about you. They say, look, I maintain a standard of fashion, and I'm curious whether or not you're going to meet my standard. What you're actually doing is you're creating a platform for the other person to be flirtatious. You're saying, of course, you don't have to impress me, but I'm giving you an opportunity to. I'm curious what you'll do with it. If your questions, and we've discussed this before, if your questions are just yes or no, or they're the classic questions, the person's not going to get to learn about themselves. And a good relationship involves each of you individually feeding each other's growth. Feeding each other's growth, often by doing your own growth, but also by creating that stage for them to meditate and reflect on who they are as a person. The greatest form of flirtation is seeing the other person and being able to communicate with them in their language, in their cares, to show them, I know who I am, and I know what I care about, and who I am is not just my terms, is not just my concepts, is not just all these things. Who I am, to my core, is someone who cares about helping others. I am a person who is a good partner, and what a good partner does is sees where you are at, sees what's important to you, and supports you in that growth. What does the perfect date night look like to you when you're stressed? That is a question that says, I want to be there for you when you're stressed, but I don't want to be there for you in just what I want to give to you, and I just want you out of this stress. Some people might answer that and say, the perfect thing for me is just to have space to myself. Oh, thanks for sharing that. Now I know who you are. The perfect thing for me is to just spend time together, watch a movie. The perfect thing for me is to sit there and just have someone to vent to. The perfect thing for me is to sit there and be problem solving. The perfect thing, everyone has their own unique answers. But this is how you are flirting with them, because you are actually bringing to the table that connection. You are saying in your silent conversation, I want to build something here. I'm real. I'm serious about this. If that threatens someone, of course, maybe you're not trying to build the same thing. If you are very intense, you really might not be building the same thing here. But that's the point, because you're authentic. And when you're authentic, you will necessarily attract people who are real. You're not going to sit down and play all these games trying to figure out How do I fix myself to be this perfect person for another? It'll never work. It can't work. How long will you be happy like that? Changing yourself, adapting, moving worlds and earths to try to be something that you're not. The better you're able to see and express yourself and understand what you are, what you bring, what you need, the better you're able to actually bring that to the table, the better you're able to make space for another person to bring what they have to the table, the better you have bricks laid down that are made from each of your individualities, the better you're able to create a structure that lasts. There's something that I personally like to do that encourages you might ask a wonderful question. I call it rule number 1. You can't ask the same question back. Granted, I've made exceptions, but the point is to encourage the other person to ask their own questions. If people are just always asking the same question back, now I'm not saying be a dictator. Rule number 1, I'm going to decide how things go. You're not going to ask the same question back. I'm talking about, sorry, that's my rule. That's already, even if there is a back and forth there, even if there is a playing there are even cases in movies, and we see just in the movies, where someone could literally push back, and in their pushing back, in their lack of interest, they are conveying something, and they're conveying, I am testing. As of now, I'm not yet convinced that we could be a good match, because I'm not yet convinced that you could see the side of me and know how to handle it. And handling it doesn't mean always pushing. Sometimes it means pulling back and being respectful of the boundary. And sometimes it means, I'm putting up a fake boundary here, and I want you to see that. So rule number 1, if you can, I think it's super valuable to encourage the other person to ask their own questions. Because if people are just asking the same questions back, first of all, if you ask a really good question and they just ask the same question back, you've had more time to think about it. You probably have a more developed response. And then sometimes you end up just comparing your responses. And then you forget to even allow that person to share of themselves what drives them. A good question is a gift. Try to reciprocate that in conversation. If someone also asks you a good question, try to ask your own good questions back. Really the things that drive you and make you so curious. That gives people the feeling of being seen. And being seen is one of the strongest things we can do in flirtation. Giving people the ability to be seen. And I'm just going to add one final rule for the video. I call it rule number 8. For something to exist in conversation, someone has to introduce it. If you're having a conversation with someone and you're just being yourselves, you're joking around, you're laughing, then you don't need to have, we learn often in different environments, boundaries, and you don't talk about these topics, and you can't broach these things, and wait till this number date or this. And I think it just doesn't work, because yeah, of course you're not going to ask about someone's trauma. At least I wouldn't think necessarily on the first date, but you have to assess based on the situation you're in. Hey, where do I feel we are? And do we feel we're in the same place? And am I pushing us to go a step further? That's the excitement. That's going on a journey together. That's what a relationship is. You're not going to be the same people always. You're going to constantly adapt and hear each other. So for something to exist, someone has to introduce it. I grew up in a culture where silence wasn't awkward. You would sit there and you just got to enjoy each other's presence. Yeah, it's nice to hear people's thoughts, but you didn't have to fill in the space. That ties back to our silent conversation and the importance of being aware of it. If in silence, you just enjoy each other's presence, You don't need to force anything. You can look around, you can just be yourselves. It's not awkward. You don't need to fill in the space. And if your energy there, and I'm talking about whoever is in some way guiding this flirtation, if your energy is, I am just present, I enjoy being present, I'm not forcing anything, I don't need to force anything, because it's just nice for me to be in your presence, because I can feel and see who you are, and that's just wonderful. You're nice to look at, you're enjoyable to speak with, and you're enjoyable to be around. Your presence is felt. This silent conversation is often just as important, if not more important, than what's said out loud. And when you master the silent conversation, you find yourself able to say the most crazy things. And people love that because you're not constrained. How powerful does it feel when we're together? I don't need to worry. I can be myself. I can say what it is. I can make mistakes. I don't need to present any image, or I can just be myself. And from that space of being myself, things are just wonderful. This person makes me feel like myself. This person brings that out in me. This person is wonderful to be around without effort, without forcing. And when I put in effort that's seen and felt, that is the most enjoyable feeling in the world. That is the feeling of being seen. May you find wonderful success in your authentic flirtation. May you get to discover of yourself, of others, and may you find the most wonderful person that you can build life with. And you start to realize that when you get to know someone's uniqueness, that is what you want to build around. And you just continue to grow together, and you really support each other, and you really want to see each other succeed. So you're not forcing it, and forcing is the most exhausting thing in the world. So may you find it easy and enjoyable to push more, to grow more, to discover yourself, and to have authentic flirtation no matter where you are with whoever it is. Have a wonderful, wonderful time in your dating and your marriages and so on and so forth. Thank you.